the time 8:30, so we're going to kick off now. So thank you again for everyone who's joined. I'll say that last time. My name is Jack Southon. I'm an Associate Director with Capita. I'm running this series of webinars on behalf of the Metropolitan branch, but it's really open opportunity to talk to anyone nationally, internationally, who's looking towards their charter application. I'm supported with Ian and Katie, my other co-hosts, who are sharing presentation duties from Thames Water, and we're alternating weeks. So this week you've got me. Next slide, there we go. So we're keeping the introduction quite short this week on the basis that hopefully a lot of you have attended previous weeks, and if you do want more details about the scheme, what we're running, please have a look at the webinar, the website, and cool, yeah, no, thank you. Sorry, just checking. It's always reassuring when you're doing a chat thing and the chat comes through first thing when someone's going to say, I can't hear you, but you can all hear me, brilliant. So if you are interested, do look at the website. It's under the events page. We've got a special site for this, the page for this series, and it just takes you through, if you look at the first two sessions, a bit more detail about what we're trying to do and how we're going to do it. I did want to take a moment just for a little bit of reflection, just to give people, late joiners, just a chance to join us. But we're at week 5 now. So if you have been following this from the beginning and you are doing the tasks every week and you're progressing, you've done all that, fantastic, congratulations. You know, just take a moment now to reflect in the great self-esteem that you've got, very well deserved. If the other 99% of you haven't quite kept up to date so far, I just want to take a moment just to reflect on the deadlines you're setting for yourself and the achievability and success. We are in National Mental Health Awareness Week, and one of the things when I mentor people towards their chartership is people setting themselves unrealistic deadlines, failing to meet those, and then getting disheartened and disinterested in the process. So I think it's a really good opportunity now, week 5, just to reset how you think about your application for chartership, the timelines you're working to, and making sure that it's something that is achievable for you. I'm hoping in this lockdown period that you're finding that you do have a little bit more time, and you are, you know, the series is really helping you to motivate you to achieve your chartership. But if you're like me, I can tell you what I would have done. I'd have sat down, watched the first 2 weeks, got really energized, done my tasks, and then probably around week 3, something else would have happened, like a work deadline or a personal something would have happened in my life, and I might not have achieved week 3 doing my write-up then. And I probably would have felt quite good about that because I've got the first 2 weeks in the bag, and I'd say, okay, well, week 4 I'll just do 2. So I sit down for week 4 and I try and do my 2, but maybe I achieve 1, maybe I only achieve about half of 1. I think that's fine. Okay, so week 5, I'm going to do the 2 from last week, and then week 6, I'll do the other 2, and I'll soon catch up. But it's that point where you need to take a step back from what you're looking at and work out, well, I haven't actually successfully managed to do 1 every week. How realistically is it that I'm going to be able to do 2 for the next 3 weeks to make sure that I can catch up? And I think what you need to look at is what's achievable for you. And if that's 1 a week, then just push the other ones out. Just focus on the one that we're presenting each week, and then you can circle back and catch up on those other ones when you get a chance. But don't set yourself up to say, I'm going to do 2 this week, I'm going to do 2 next week, I'll be back on track. Because if you don't achieve that next week, you're going to start to feel disheartened, and you're going to get disenfranchised from the whole process. So I think basically, as my reflection today is, think about how you're progressing, think about what you can achieve, and set some sensible deadlines for yourself. Okay, that's that. Moving on to the content then. So this is the sequence we're going to go through it. I'm going to introduce the competency, set out some key questions, give some examples, and then set some activities as we usually do. We are in week 5, so we're looking at competence B3, and we'll be finishing up with B4 from Ian next week. So B3 is the ability to initiate, implement, and manage change. When we're looking at the B competencies, because we've gone through the first 2, we're going through the third today. I just want to take a moment just to reflect on how they all slightly vary, because they can be slightly complicated. And I've highlighted here the key words in bold and then the key topics underlined. So to differentiate between B1 and B2, where we were analysing and evaluating, identifying, developing, and evaluating, we are now initiating, implementing, and managing. and we're focused on change rather than problems, options, or solutions. So if you, when you're looking at your topics, looking at examples, really focus on those keywords. So it's the initiate, implement, and manage change. It could be that you've got an example where you've taken it all the way through all 4 competencies, but what we're looking for here is potentially a different one or a slightly different one for each one. And the focus of today is how we initiate, implement, and manage, particularly change. So our key questions. So obviously, why was a change required? So that's just focusing you on what the activities were. Did anything threaten the success of the solution or the delivery? So that's that's looking at implementation and managing it. What were your options? Was it successful or not? So not every project example has to be successful. We can learn from our failures as much as we can our successes, and often more so. How did you plan for the introduction of change? What steps did you take to ensure stakeholder buy-in? How did you resolve any problems? How did you deal with contractual risk? And how did you deal with risk? So we're going to look at some examples here. These are quite wordy examples because it is a quite technical competence, but we've got a few pages here, so I'll just take you through these briefly. So this first example is as a project manager, looking from a project manager point of view. And it says, as a project manager, the type of contract influences how I manage change when working on project X. And I've just redacted that for our own confidentiality, but you're very welcome to name projects explicitly and encouraged to do so. The appointment was based under NEC3 professional service contracts. That's just a type of contract if you're not familiar with it. I manage changes to the project using the prescribed approach for managing change in the contract. And when I anticipate change, I communicate this by an early warning. If an early warning comes realised, I submit a compensation event, which is followed up by quotation if changes to budget and programme are expected. A recent example involved a request for increase of number of model simulations in a flood risk management options being assessed for cost-benefit analysis. Cost, programme, risk, and resourcing considerations were taken into account. So this is an interesting example in that it does take you through the steps in terms of managing change. Particularly the initiate, implement, and manage is the early warning, compensation event, and quotation in an NEC3 professional service contract point of view. And that sort of tried to break down those steps. They've also very importantly included an example. For in this case, it's a flood risk management options assessment project, but you could integrate that within the answer as well. The second example then here, this is a different type of project, so a different type of contract, excuse me. So in project Y involved an extension of scope. So you could give more fleshed out answer example of what the extension of scope was. But again, that's just been redacted for our confidentiality. This resulted in the need to undertake more data collection, liaison with new stakeholders, and additional reporting. I communicated the associated increase in fee, liabilities, and changes to the programme with the client. The change was agreed by issuing an updated proposal letter to the client and their subsequent agreement. So this is again focusing on the contractual project management sides of change here, where they've recognised the extension of scope is a change to the project, to the contract. And they've initiated discussions and scoping with the client. Then they've implemented that change by updating their proposal letter and managed to make sure that was agreed. I'm going to just ignore the Q&A for now and come back to those at the end. Our second set of examples here are looking at resourcing and delivery. So if you're not in a project manager role, if you're not dealing with contracts, these are perhaps a little bit more relevant to you. So our third example is as a team leader, change in resourcing with my team is often required. Recently, a team member was diverted away from their current commitments to an urgent project. Together, we developed a timetable to meet the demands of the current project, whilst still enabling some progress to be made on their current workload when time permitted. Relevant project managers were consulted and the short-term diversion was managed successfully. So again, we're recognising that a change is needed because of this external factor that the staff members are required on this other project. And then you've implemented a change which is prioritising their workload, passing it around, reallocating it, and then managing that by reviewing it, seeing how that's going, and communicating that to other people to make sure it's secured. Our fourth example then, as a technical lead on projects, I often need to cope with change in hydraulic model studies or any type of project really. A recent example involved a very long runtime. So this is something, this is a time and delivery constraint, and model instabilities for an area of the river Z, again, just redacted for our purposes. I effectively communicated this to the client and presented a prioritized approach to resolve the issue, increasing model grid size, simplifications in low-risk areas, and utilizing model restart files to speed up troubleshooting, evidencing that this would not detract from quality. So again, there's an issue, there's a problem, they're not going to be able to meet their requirements, and so they've had to change their approach midway through. And so they've made a plan on how to do that. They've initiated that conversation and that change with their client here or their colleagues or their provider. Then they've implemented that by actually undertaking it, and then managed it to make sure that it's not going to impact on their outcomes. And finally, so looking at this from a more of a utilities background, so on a surface water model building project, a client requested 15 areas of field testing. After feasibility, the program delivery changed due to requirements for site enabling works. This has a large impact on the program, as field testing is the most critical task and most labor intensive and costly part of the project. I successfully rearranged the program and reassigned the field teams to other work. The startup of the model build areas had to be accelerated to fill the program. I had to agree all the changes with my client. I issued a change control document due to the change in the project scope and the new program containing revised delivery dates. Progress meetings and concise minutes aided in the control of the program that was delivered on time and on budget. I learned that a flexible approach is often required to anticipate future changes. So again, changing project scope, changing project time delivery here has been recognized. A change to staffing, ordering of work has been implemented, and then that's been managed by making sure that's contractually squared away and monitored over time. So those are our examples for today. Our cross-referencing for other accreditations, so we're focusing on the Chartered Environmentalist, but if you are looking at Chartered Scientist, Chartered Environmentalist, I've dropped off Chartered Engineer here for some reason. I think we did that last week, so I'll go back and sort those two. But those are the relevant ones there. I won't dwell on them too much, but those are in the slide pack as well. Our activities then for today are to think about a project that you've worked on. So you should sort of have ideally a short list of projects that you can refer to here. And then think about these questions. So how did the project delivery vary from the original plan? So when you started the project, you probably had a plan, a methodology, a program, a budget set out. And over time, by some sort of external events, that will have changed. So how did that project change from day one to the end day? And then think about what factors impacted this. So that could have been external client demands, external supplier issues. It could be new data, it could be changes in other legislation or something like that. And then how did you recognize that these occurred? So how did you know that these had come? Ideally, in a forecasting capacity. So how did you see this change coming? And then how did you respond to it? What actions did you take to respond to that impact? So again, I'm trying to use different words here, so impact rather than change, but when something happens, what did you do? How did you initiate any changes? And then what did you actually do to implement changes? And that could be conversations with clients or suppliers or teams. It could be making people aware that this thing might be coming, might be affecting the project. Now it is affecting the project, and this is how we are making a change to respond to that and deal with that. And then how did you secure the project successfully moved forward after the impact? Again, so looking at this from a managing change point of view and securing that. So what did you do contractually to secure that? How did you manage your risk in that position? And how did you make sure that you got the resources or changes that you needed? Oh, gone one too far there, hold on. So our activity this week is slightly different type of activity for us, and you might need to wait for the slides to go up on the website. Hopefully we'll get those shortly for you. But I want you to look at the examples from today. I want you to take 3 highlighters, one for initiating, one for implementing, and one for managing. and just mark up the examples that we've given you to identify which parts of the case study show initiating, which parts show implementing, and which parts show managing. The value of this is just to really emphasize that all the examples really need to cover all three aspects of the competence. And then prepare 5 bullet points to evidence your abilities to initiate, implement, and manage change. So thinking about those key questions. Now, I would like you to do the same test. So mark up those examples that those bullet points to show where you are covering off initiating, implementing, and managing change. Feedback on this activity would be really welcome because it's not one we've done before, but I think would be a really useful one for us to try. And if you find it useful, then that would be fantastic. Just to cover off the tips, then we always cover these. So very briefly, always write in the first person. So it's all about you. It's great to say there is an I in CIWEM. It's also a we, but we're focusing on I when we're writing up our mandatory competencies. Be honest about what you've contributed to a project. If it's only part of it, if you've only been responding to part of change, don't claim to be a project manager if you weren't. But you can absolutely be. If you're delivering tasks, that's task management. If you're delivering resources, even if it's one person, that's fantastic. Computers, data, money, those are all great things to manage and respond to change with. Understand why you're doing it, so the context of it, and particularly the bigger picture. Be concise in what you're writing because you do have a word limit. Remember what you've written afterwards, so when we do come to our professional review, you know what the reviewers are talking about, and don't limit yourself to experiencing current employer or paid employment. If you've got relevant examples from previous employer or slightly different sector, or indeed voluntary work, then please do include those. We've got an additional slide for you today, which is just to highlight that the Fast Track to Membership course is now available online. They're taking bookings. In fact, there's a course running tomorrow by the learning team at CIWEM, and another course in June. That is a paid course, but it is small numbers and you get more direct feedback. It's not affiliated with me or the other presenters, but we have worked with the CIWEM learning team to make sure that it is tailored to support people on this course, and they should sync up very well. It's sort of being posted as a finishing school for this, so if you do feel like at the end of the webinar series you do need a bit more support and you are able to opt in for a charged course, then do have a look at that. It may be of interest to you. There's a little bit of a breakdown on there looking at what the different sessions are being done, but it is very popular face-to-face course, but now has been moved over to a webinar-based one to make use of the technologies. So have a look at that, either learning@ciwem.org or find it on the website. Also to say that it is, in addition to Mental Health Awareness Week, it is on Friday, the International Day of Biological Diversity. So CIWEM are running a few events for that. There's a call immediately following this that might be a bit late to sign up to, but there's also another seminar tomorrow. So do have a look on the website if you're interested in signing up for that. Remember, always best to sign up 24 hours in advance to make sure you get the connection details. So if you do want that to be part of that webinar tomorrow, best to sign up as soon as we finished here today. I'm going to bring this to a close and then go back to the questions. So just to say thank you all. Save the date for same time next week. It's really great that if you can dial in person, just because we can do the Q&A. But if you are unable to meet in for 1 week, then do have a look at the website for the recordings. We've got Ian next week looking at B4 to bring us to the close of the B competencies. You should get a survey link after this. If you could fill it in, that'd be fantastic. We're really working on the feedback. And please do remember to book for the next session at least 24 hours in advance. The booking should be open now. All right, let me just jump back up to the key question. No, maybe it was the activities. I can't remember which one we normally leave it on, but hopefully that's useful for you whilst we open the Q&A then. So looking at these then, so this is someone received some feedback from an interview, so the professional interview they received. That Chris picked up that they were just following normal procedure. One of the examples we gave here, particularly looking at that project management one, does follow through on the procedure, and the question suggests it doesn't indicate that your competency in managing change, surely. How did your approach? So the competency I've slightly rewritten to shorten it to fit for the slide, but what we're trying to show here is that the person understands and has a competency in delivering change within a structured format, and particularly in this case, the contractual term, so the early warning, change event, and compensation, and quotation. But you do really need to give a project example of where you've successfully done that. I would suggest the more competent you get in contractual management, the more you refer to procedure. And there's nothing wrong with following procedure as long as you fully understand it and can implement it. And what we're looking for is a competence in delivering that. So it might be that you can more briefly surmise the procedure, but then actually give a more generous answer to how you've implemented that in terms of an example. But managing change, having a structured response to change is absolutely the best way to do it, in my opinion. Okay, looking at our next one. How could I use change management example even if the client doesn't accept change? So again, it's what you've got there is you've hopefully initiated the process by issuing early warning. You've changed process, including new fee, program, etc., but the client refused. So you've maybe done a compensation event, you've maybe done a quote, but then the quote was refused. So you've initiated, you've attempted to implement a change, a specific change that you had in mind, but that's not been accepted. And so that you've had to then manage the process of carrying on with the project where that change hasn't been accepted. And so your management is actually perhaps got more depth to it there, because it's not a case of you suggested something and it's been agreed. You've been suggesting it's been refused. How do you carry on? So that could be a very interesting example to write up. And as I say, not everything has to be a fantastic success. If you learn as much from failures as you do successes. Perhaps don't write all of your charter's competencies based on failed projects though, because that might not give the right impression. But a few in there where you've suggested something, tried it, and it's not been implemented or accepted, but then you've actually had to manage the process of carrying on, and that's sparked a new response from you in terms of initiating and implementing an alternative change within the constraints of what you're working with. So I think that could be a very interesting example. Can you demonstrate the ability to manage change by referring to how we include a cost range for projects where unknowns during the initial stages of a project? Okay, so you can. So I think that what you're asking here is, can I demonstrate the change by suggesting that we're including a range of costs at the beginning of a project? I would suggest that's not necessarily a change at the start of a project, because a change has to be in response to something, but you could say that you manage them by discussing potential changes at the start of the project, and then as those changes occur, you update the client that they're approaching, and you then make sure that you've got agreement on the whatever the current fee is that you are. It's more about if you're quoting a range at the beginning of a project in terms of if it's internal, external, budget holder, you obviously, as you work through the project, that client, that person wants to know where you are in that range, at the top or your bottom, and you are updating them on factors that affect that. So I think you could do that, but think about more project delivery rather than the start of a project. Project changes or delivery changes are always easier to think about partway through rather than day one, in my opinion. Would you recommend providing one example or a couple for this competency? I would try for two. I think two examples are always best if you can. One really good one, and then perhaps if you feel that you've got a shorter one that you can put more concisely in, then that'd be fantastic. The B competencies I think are worth spending a few words on, whereas some of the others we can be a little bit more concise on. But yeah, if you can do two examples, that'd be great. Even if they're very similar, then that's fine. But one really good one, and then you could sort of allude to other projects that you've done as well. If you have project management experience, is this better example to use than technical change? I think they're equally valid. I think if you were using two examples and you had one from project management background and one from a technical delivery background or resource management, thing like that, I think it'd be great to use one from either. But just to say that you don't, project management isn't necessarily better. It's perhaps easier because a lot of project management is focused around change, particularly if you're using the NEC family of contracts. It's very explicit, but you know, in a technical delivery role, you will be responding to change equally. You'll be initiating, implementing, and managing it just as much on a daily basis. So don't feel that you're limited to project management examples here. Will you receive this presentation? So we'll produce a PDF copy of this, and that should be loaded up to the website. If you're familiar with the website, so go on to CIWEM.org/events, and the top event, normally we're receiving pole position, thankfully, still, and that you'll click through to a website and it'll have all the recordings of previous events, PDFs of the slides, and any additional materials that we reference in those events. Okay, so that's the Q&A. I've got some in the chat as well, so let me just go to that. Whilst I'm doing that, if anyone else wants to ask any questions. Okay, I'll respond to that individual. Someone else has just asked me to have a follow-up on something, so I'll speak to them individually. But if we've got no further questions, then just to reiterate that we are here next week on B4. I'm going to get rid of that box in case it's obscuring your questions. I'll get the PDF of these slides as soon as possible so that hopefully you get a chance to do this highlighting task, and hopefully you find that really useful. If you would be so kind to fill in the survey at the end, then that would be brilliant, just so we can monitor that. We've got about 100 people online at the moment. It's slightly dropping off just as I do my close down, but we've got a lot of people accessing this offline. We had about 500 people access the CIWEM web page, our specific web page on this in one day a couple of weeks ago. So there is really big demand for this. We've not mentioned the forum today, but that is coming. We've got agreement from the CIWEM team that we can put that on the CIWEM LinkedIn page. So I will take an action to progress that. Can I use my, as we've just had another question come through, so can I use my PhD project example for B3? So yeah, absolutely, you can use a PhD example, that's absolutely fine. I would say don't use your PhD for every example. We're looking for a breadth of experience here. But if you had a particular interesting example of initiating, implementing, and managing change in your PhD, perhaps you had to change your research question partway through, that could be quite a strong example for this. I've got a raised hand, so let me work out what I do with that. If you've got an issue, I'm conscious of GDPR, so I'm not going to name the person who's raised their hand, but if you could just send me a message on the chat, that would be great, and I'll respond to that. If you're having trouble finding the chat, if you go to the top of your screen, you should have a little chat box or a little Q&A box. But I will just vamp for 2 more minutes just whilst we finish up. If anyone is signed up for the next webinar and you've received connection details, then do have a look at that. I'm just typing in something.
All the remaining webinars are now available to book. The bookings are open on that web page. And all the, as Jack said, all the slides and recordings from these webinar series go up thank you again for attending. So thank you again for attending.
Nice. I think that raised hand might have been in error, so thank you everyone for that. What we'll do is just ramp up there. Thank you again, Barbara, for booking these for us, and hope to speak to you all next week. Thank you. Have a great week and stay safe.